All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Marcus Vandenbent, and for today, August 5th, 2022, we're going to take a dive into the Salesforce digital experience. So let's go take a look at what we have to offer for today. And for our agenda, what I was going to cover is essentially introductions and also give you kind of a reason why I'm specifically diving into the digital experience for Salesforce. And when I talk about digital experience, I'm really talking about the external facing community portal that Salesforce has to offer, and that's part of the eco space, so to speak. We'll dive in a little bit into our objectives for today and kind of what our goal is, and then really give us a definition of what Salesforce CRM and then specifically the Salesforce portal or the digital experience is. And then we'll finish off with I'll give you a portal demo and kind of really look at not just the front end, but also kind of what's behind the hood, so to speak. So we'll dive in a little bit into some of the specific configurations and settings for the digital experience so that allow us to kind of brand and make them as unique as needed. For this case, what we're talking about here is I actually have multiple portals for one Salesforce organization, and there was a need for that. So again, let's go ahead and move forward. So let's start off with introductions and why. And just to let you know, I would love for this to be a very interactive session. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to kind of hold up your hand. There should be a Q&A area, and we have several other folks in the background that will make me aware that a question's being asked. But please go ahead and take your time. Ask me a question, and again, there are really no wrong questions, and I'll try to see if I can answer it in an appropriate time. However, if there are, let's say, 30 questions in one shot, of course, I'll probably give you a little bit of a timeout, and we'll see if we can maybe push that towards the end so we can keep the presentation going. But all right, so let's talk about why we're here, right? So let me just start with I'm presenting today for Improving, and as you can tell, Improving, we're a consulting firm, and we have lots of things that we offer. We do really live in the Microsoft ecosystem, but for today's session, we don't just do Microsoft. We also do a lot of other technologies, other platforms, and again, that's why today really excited to introduce Salesforce, the digital experience. But like I stated earlier, it's not just cloud strategies. We do interactive design. We have lots of custom dev solutions. We do a lot of integration, and that's something else that we'll see as part of my use case for today for the digital experience. That's one of the reasons why we had to implement what we did. Of course, we do provide strategic consulting. We have lots of collaborative solutions, and of course the agile training, as well as the data engineering. And what I mean there is just lots of data, because Power BI, dashboards, and things of that sort. So again, my name is Marcus Vandenbent. I've been with Improving now, believe it or not, for 6 years, which is very excited about this. I have about shockingly, I was looking at this, kind of showing my age here a little bit. I've got 30 years of experience. This is coming from, the on-prem world to cloud-based services and everything in between. My current title is I am a principal consultant. Just to give you a little bit of background, as you can tell, Vandenbent, probably a little bit of a unique name. The proper way would be to kind of space it out, and it would actually be Vandenbent. And like I stated, I am from the Netherlands. So I'm originally from the Netherlands. I grew up there. I migrated to the US back in '85. So I've been here quite a while. Currently reside in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm definitely 100% a Salesforce CRM enthusiast, as not probably a CRM enthusiast altogether, because I just love the technology. I think it's really neat to look at all the relationships that a CRM has to offer, the relationships between an account, a contact, and the related opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. We'll dive in a little bit further. And I just threw out there that, again, I love to travel. All right, so yeah, granted, I'm from the Netherlands, so you can imagine that kind of makes sense ending up in the US, makes sense that I love to travel. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit on my use case as to, so, okay, digital experience. Why? What in the world did I need that for, right? So we've got a Salesforce platform. We're using the CRM. We've actually even rolled out the service console, and that's really the service console, what I'm talking about there. That's part of the Salesforce ecosystem that's really towards supporting your clients, right? And it could be internal or external facing, but think of it like a help desk that could be internal for IT, but also it could be a help desk if you're selling a different type of product or a different type of service where you have your customers log cases and then have the ability, of course, to take action on those cases. And that's kind of where the use case comes into play, because that's what the digital experience allows for, right? So in this particular use case, what we were doing is we had a client who was really a holding company of multiple other smaller companies, and each smaller company really had its own kind of requirements and its own support software, its own sales software, and you name it, everything is unique. So we were brought in as a consulting firm to look at what we could do to really simplify support, to really streamline that process, to collect metrics across the board. Because imagine if you have 30 different mini companies, how do you try to obtain how everyone is doing against each other, or just really just what are your metrics? And that is extremely challenging. Now you could throw everything into a data lake and then collect your content, but it comes to a point where you're really dumping everything into a spreadsheet and gathering that info, maybe throwing it into a Power BI dashboard, but it's a very manual process. So we were really called in again to kind of streamline this, to allow for all these various companies to really gain momentum under one. And that's really the goal here, to integrate between all these various companies and then provide that one system to allow for everything that I'm telling you about, to kind of allow for that to function properly. And of course that tier, let me make sure I read this correctly, the tier 0 support. It's relatively, that term to me is still a little bit new. I know it's been around for a while, but that really allows your customer who may be logging a case to be completely, what's the word I'm looking for? Really maintain themselves. So in other words, when they create a case, they can take care of the problem themselves by taking advantage of either past cases or maybe even a knowledge-based article. And again, that was a need. And as well as what I mentioned before, imagine we have all these numerous companies. There's going to be opportunities where you have one customer that's under one particular mini client, we have another customer under another client, but perhaps they need the same tools, right? Or perhaps there is an opportunity where one company needs a product that sits under a different company, so to speak. And in the past, that would be quite challenging, right? Because now you're talking about a new system, a new platform, and something that may not necessarily be as easy as this could be. So if you just use the one system, now cross-selling is something that's very that potential is there, rather. So again, that's kind of the use case, and this is why we built what we built. So I wanted to make sure I made that point, because I could show you a demo and provide you that tribal knowledge of why we use the digital experience site. But again, that use case kind of fills that void. So hence the reason why I'm bringing that up. So let's keep moving. And this kind of shows you what the goal was for this particular customer. And you can see all these various platforms, right? We've got here the Salesforce ecosystem, we have the Jira Cloud ecosystem, then we have even Office 365, Smartsheet, and even Azure DevOps. So how does all of that function? How does all of that work? And this is where you have certain integration pieces or third-party plugins that allow all of these various elements, all of these various platforms to talk to one another. But that was our goal. And again, because we were coming for so many different platforms, having that one Salesforce piece really assisted the process. I just wanted to give you that slide just to kind of to give you an understanding as to what was what. So again, what are our objectives for today? And it's really, we'll dive in a little bit here on this particular slide. Is kind of, we'll define what CRM is. So again, it's a relationship between your various objects, and that could be sales, it could be focused on support, it could be focused on honestly marketing, even finance, analytics and such, but it's really a relationship between different objects. So think of it as a, you know, the old-fashioned Rolodex that a salesperson would use. And in the Rolodex, I had my contacts, I had my account. So, and again, then of course, based on my notes in my Rolodex, I could have a potential opportunity, things of that sort. And when I mean opportunity, that's a potential sell, right? A potential sale, so to speak. So Salesforce kind of allows you that connection, like a standard CRM, that relationship that's then built between all the various objects. And on the support side, so now we've talked about sales. So now on the support cloud, how does that work? Well, if you have a client who could be a potential, who's actually initially a lead that's then converted to a account because there's an associated opportunity that's been sold. So now I'm actually doing business with this client. Now all of a sudden I have a need because there's a contract in place to support this customer. And Salesforce allows us to then have that digital experience where the customer could actually log a case. But not just that, even taking one step backwards, if we look at what I just explained, you could also have, of course, if you don't even use the digital experience, you could just have the support module, the support cloud interface be utilized where you could have a case that is maybe triggered by an email or potentially maybe a phone call. Maybe you have something like Vonage where there's an integration between Salesforce and Vonage where you actually leave, let's say I'm a customer, I reach out to my my customer rep and the person's busy, but because I have a voicemail that picks up that call, that could then actually potentially create a Salesforce case. So again, as we roll this out to all these various entities, all these mini companies, it allows us to really have that one integration, that one place where you now can see all your various tickets. But again, just because I have all these various cases, they do need to be somewhat filtered into numerous groups or by product, and then of course by mini company. We'll refer to that later as maybe mini brands, so to speak, but that's kind of what that is. So yeah, that kind of gives us a little bit of a definition of what Salesforce CRM is, and then also what the Sales Cloud is, and then what the digital experience, and then you have the Salesforce Support Cloud too. So the Salesforce Support Cloud is really what sits in the back end, and then the digital experience is really the front end, what a customer would hit, right? And when I say back end and front end, I'm talking about externally facing that could either have a associated community license or even like a what I would say like a guest account, so to speak. So again, so for today, now the next step is kind of like I'm going to really display what this Salesforce, what those relationships are. So let's take a peek, and I've got a little bit of a schema here. Now, I mentioned this earlier. I was just talking to some of the gentlemen beforehand. This particular slide, yes, it does show the schema, but it's a very, very high level view here, because you can imagine if you look at Salesforce, and it's quite a complex platform. There's going to be more than just these 6 tables, of course, right? So think of this as a database. You have your relationships where you have the one-to-many, many-to-one, a one-to-one kind of bits and pieces, so to speak, right? And in this case, I've just put kind of your standard tables out here, and really showing the schema and then the relationships between these particular tables. So what I want to focus on here, we've got the account. Then we have the associated contact. So in other words, I have XYZ company, and then I have John Doe, I have Jane Doe, I could have whoever else, right? But then I also have the associated opportunity. So if I have a potential sale that could be closed, a won, that could be closed, lost, I need to then associate that with my account. And this platform allows for that to happen. Those are kind of your default kind of Salesforce on the sales side tables. Granted, there's a lot more in the background. But for our particular use case, we built this quite a bit ago. We also have the contracted services object, and I won't give you too much detail there, but what that means for this particular case, the opportunities and then the related product that could be sold based off of that opportunity, we needed a little bit of more of a custom object, and that's where the CSP came into play. So this is an actual custom object that we created. We gave a custom relationship with it, and you can kind of tell with the arrows how they're all connected. So you see the contracted services payment, you've got it connected to your case, you've got it connected to also your account, just by following kind of the mismatch of lines here. You can also see here I've got the contract, so this could be an associated contract with the account, with the specific contact, but as well, what I wanted to point out, and again, because I'm thinking digital experience, external facing, because that was my use case, I will need my cases object. And that's why I've got this centered. And as you can tell, not only can I have a relationship between an account and a case, but also with the contact, with the opportunity, with the CSP, with the contract. So it's pretty neat that I have all this flexibility to kind of create a case and then associate it with all these various elements. Typically, though, I would say once a case comes in, you would typically assign it to a contact and then the contact is associated with the account. But you could have a use case maybe where there's an opportunity that comes in, and as part of the implementation, maybe there's a case that you want to create, and hence the reason why you would have that. Right. So, and the neat part there is if you would click on Salesforce itself and look under the opportunity, you could even see the related list. And when I talk about related list, it's really that relationship that you see here with those arrows and the lines that then show what you can and can't see. So, but yeah, and again, if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out. Just ping, throw it into Q&A, and we'll keep moving. But all right, so let's keep moving here. So let's really dive into kind of why, right? Why or when do we want to use the digital experience? And it's just a really great time of kind of really great use for it to expedite some of these common service requests. Because just think of, especially in our particular use case, I had maybe 15 different systems that I was logging cases through, and it was just super challenging. Some of them were better than others. Some of them were literally a spreadsheet. Some folks were just managing everything through email. So imagine having numerous systems where you're logging cases, and this is where the digital experience, this is where the service, the portal really came into play. So kind of saving time and money, honestly. Here, and this is a big important piece too, why do we do any of these upgrades? It's really to save time and money, but also to kind of free up your employees from focusing in on other things. So we want to make certain that we give the customer as well as the internal person a little bit the ability to kind of save some time there. Yeah, again, I mentioned this earlier, that tier 0, that the self-maintenance piece. When you deploy a self-service portal, you have that ability to add the knowledge base articles, those wiki articles that I mentioned earlier. This will allow you to build your community and teach your customers some skills that maybe perhaps before would have been something like a email or a different site that they would have to hit, versus now we're all going to one site that's specific for this particular brand product, so to speak. So it kind of simplifies that, right? And I love the fact that now I can take my customer, they can look at what they need to, but they can also be more self-maintenance. They can take care of themselves. The other pretty part there too is, let's say you have a customer, they hit that portal, they're working their cases, maybe they're looking at some articles, but there's also that visibility to other cases. There's that visibility to other articles. There could be messages that you may want to send to the customer that are something that they may not have been aware about earlier. Like I mentioned earlier, that use case for cross-selling, that could be something that could be in play here too. So allowing the customers to learn on their own by hitting the digital experience site and really discovering newer pieces that your company may have to offer that before would have been a much more manual process. And I don't know about you, but if I get any kind of email that's informational about a new product or anything that's even remotely interesting, it's probably going to go in my spam folder, honestly. We gain so much email that the more and more we receive email, we try to drive away from email because it takes us away from our standard day-to-day job, and that's kind of where this comes into play. So, okay, talking about that, let me keep moving because we're right at 1:22, or actually 12:22, depending on your time zone. So when do we want to use the self-experience site, right? When do we want to use that digital experience? Really, when you have that requirement for your knowledge bases. So your knowledge base articles, you want to share that. That would be one reason. External access. I want my customers to come in and access their tickets, but not just their tickets, maybe the tickets that are associated with their account. And I also want them to log a case as well as be interactive or collaborate with support in the portal itself. Again, if we take a step back, yes, we could do that all via phone call. We can all do that via an email. But one, phone call, if you have a limited amount of support staff, especially with the giant resignation that we've all encountered over the last few years, the teams may not necessarily as big as they once were. This kind of allows us a little bit of that buffer. So now a customer can come in, they can log their own case, they can then maintain themselves, again, at tier 0. But what's cool about this too is, of course, if I assign someone a full Salesforce license, which you never want to do, of course, for external access, but we're talking about assigning them a community license, which will then grant them access to a limited version of Salesforce. So whatever you think is applicable that they should see, you can make visible. Now, keep in mind, though, there are a lot of shared components, and we'll dive into that a little bit deeper as to what is what, because that can be a little bit challenging. And again, cost, right? So imagine if I do have an internal portal and I have, let's say, 1,000 users, and all these users need to log cases because it's really, I'm supporting my own internal team. Let's say I'm just an IT, corporate IT, right? And I'm supporting about 1,000 users. Not every user needs a full license if they're just logging cases. So in that case, let me push them to a digital experience for internal access where they can log cases, but also cost is going to be saved because now they're using that smaller license. So instead of that 100 and something, that's the standard cost for a Salesforce client license. Now it's between the $5 to $2, and we'll look at it a little bit deeper as to what is what there, what is a requirement. But so that kind of explains the why and the when. So let's keep moving. And here at the very end, I have that knowledge base requirement. So I do have this one slide here where I'm going to talk a little bit about the knowledge base and why have a knowledge base, because folks may wonder, and I know this is very generic, but I just wanted to cover this real quick. Again, this is what allows the customer to discover solutions on their own. So now I can take time away from my support team to really maybe focus in on more complex scenarios, where some of the situations where I have to unlock my password, maybe I need to rename my account, maybe I need to update a patch, maybe more generic pieces that could 100% fall into a knowledge base, kind of like when I have an issue logging onto Office 365 and maybe my password is incorrect and I need a little bit of assistance. I can go to Microsoft knowledge base and grab that information. So what the digital experience allows for us to do is create these knowledge articles, but then share it based off of my digital experience site. And I don't necessarily need a licensed account. So I can actually configure an environment that's completely public facing where I can have my external user access my portal and then access what they need to, but specific to that link, to that particular site. So I can have, let's say, articles that are for Pepsi Cola or something like that, or I have another articles that are for Microsoft products. I can have another article category that's just for Microsoft, and I have these 3 separate categories that could then be filtered based off of my site without needing an authenticated account. So really your guest or anonymous access. All right. So let's keep moving. So let's talk about how to use it, right? So this is kind of my screen where this is what I'm going to use to kind of go into my demo. And we're going to now look at our backend, and we're going to really look in the Salesforce setup. We'll take a peek at where that sits, talk about some of the pages, the settings, the configuration, but more importantly, I want to talk about the community license. So you've got a $2 license fee, and then you also have the $5 license fee. So what are the differences between those two? The $2 license is really what's considered like a logon. So in other words, I believe it's every 24 hours, your license will reset, but this gives your customer that temporary license where they can log in for $2, and you typically, let's say you get like 100 or so, then there's some math there, and then all of a sudden you have about 3,000 or so. I forget the exact math there. But point is, for your customers who may not necessarily need to interact with the digital experience as much as they need to, they can go ahead and you can assign them that license, versus if you're heavy users that tend to use it maybe on a day-to-day basis, they're going to want to use the $5 license. And again, that is something that you could then assign that person, and then accordingly they can just use it. So perfect. So right, so that kind of covers the licensing itself. We'll take a peek at the security and the profile, because like I mentioned, you have an authenticated access and you have the unauthenticated access, and then you even have your internal access to the digital experience. So we'll look at where the security sits, where those profiles are, where the permission sets are, and we'll kind of look at that a bit too. Then let's actually talk about the workspace. So when we talk about digital experiences, you've got a builder, your moderation, content management, dashboard administration, and guided setup. Your builder is essentially exactly what it is. That's where you build your actual pages. That's where you add your custom widgets. Your moderation, that's where you monitor your posts, your comments, you create some rules, things of that sort. Your content manager is kind of I would say I would add on to the moderation. This is where you build your collections for your specific articles or bits and pieces that you may want to share. Then there's the dashboards option. Now, in my use case, I didn't actually get to use the dashboards, and that's because I was using the standard community license and not the community plus. So I want to make sure I address that, because if you need the ability for dashboards with associated reports, and you need to for something like that to then, if you want to share that with your external facing customer, you would need the community plus license, which is there's an additional cost there versus that $5 or even $2 license. So just be aware of that. Then, of course, administration, this is where we, your Salesforce administrators live, and that's where we configure our settings and properties for the digital experience. This is where you assign who can actually access my site. So my authenticated users, how do they get there? And how do I enable that for public access? That's kind of where you would do that, as well as maybe I need a custom URL. We'll take a look at where the digital experience sites live, but then we'll see some of the custom URLs are there, as well as the URL that's your standard Salesforce URL that you could also utilize, and then you just have like almost like a custom path there that you can assign it. But as well, if you, as long as you own that domain, you can actually create your own CNAME, just point it at Salesforce. There's some instructions on how to do this, and then you can have something like help.domain.com, and that could be your digital experience site. So that's that flexibility, that functionality is there. I do like the guided setup. It's a real nice feature. So if you're very new to your digital experience and implementing and how to use it, you can go ahead and use that guided setup. That really, really helps out. I think it's something that, yeah, as a beginner, 100% just go through it. It's a little bit timely, but I think it's very helpful, and it actually takes you step by step on how to set it up and configure. And then again, like we talked about, we have our knowledge base, which to me just falls right in line with the digital experience. Because again, there could be requirements where customers only need to log a case or look at their cases. But to get to that true tier 0 support model, you really want to have those wiki articles visible. Now, I don't have a current example of this, but that could even be chat too. So as part of Salesforce, you've got the chat functionality where, as well as maybe I'm doing a search for a particular article, I could even have a chat with a certain script. So my bot could be answering based on what my customer is asking, and then those could be particular wiki articles. And again, taking one step further, I can base that off of my URL that's being utilized. So I can filter those wiki articles based on my site that could then be visible not just in the search area, but also in a chat area. All right, so let's keep going and really want to get into the demo. So I've got a little bit of a screenshot here of one of my environments, and this is just a portal with a standard graphic, and this shows you a view of cases that belong to this particular customer, but not just the customer, so my contact, but also the account itself. So we actually have a rule in place that allows a contact to not just see their own cases, but also the cases that belong to the account itself. But all right, so we're right at 1:30 or 12:30. So let me go ahead and switch gears here a little bit. And all right, so let me change and throw in my Salesforce, and keep in mind I've got a live demo here. So as you can tell, I've got my Salesforce kind of front end up here, and you can tell now I've got a of course a test article, right, a test case, and you can see kind of my story of my case here. So this is the support process itself of the case, telling the story. And again, I've logged this case, I'm working on it, but what if I need to communicate with the customer? So in that case, I can write a comment. This is a custom web part, but typically you would do it in a chatter. And I can, of course, do an email where I could send to the customer the notification. But why I wanted to show this is really the post. So if I share an update and I make it all with access, now I'm actually speaking to the customer. So if my customer has a digital experience account, they have been associated a community license, they can actually then log onto the case, or actually log onto the portal, and then view this particular case, which is, I've got the number right here, that's 0114820, and actually work on it as needed. But all right, so let's take a peek into what makes up the digital experience. We kind of looked at the front end here, but this is really just Salesforce itself. So let's jump as to where this all exists. So in our setup, and to get here, by the way, you see this little gear, you click on setup, that actually takes you to your setup. And I've got multiple windows open here just to save some time. What the beauty of Salesforce, the Lightning experience, by the way, we are in the Lightning experience, not the Classic. All that really means is I have visibility or accessibility to the new kind of UI, so to speak. And as you can tell here, it's a little bit different. So if you click on some of these other areas, you can actually tell, where is that again? Actually, it's probably in here. where you can switch back and forth between the different environments. And I'm trying to find where I'm doing that actually. But you can actually switch. Yeah, see how you've got the Salesforce Classic? So again, we are in the Lightning experience, not the Classic. But the Classic is what's probably been utilized about 5-6 years ago when they switched to Lightning. And Lightning just has a lot of different things to offer. Keep in mind, though, the Lightning experience, even though to me it's far superior over the Classic experience. On the admin side, it can still be a little bit challenging to find your different pieces, but you have the ability to look for your feature settings, your particular area that you need to configure. So again, community portal, Salesforce now considers that a digital experience. So I just type in digital experience. This gets me to where all my particular Salesforce digital experience community portals reside. So if I click on my all sites, now you can see these are all the various sites that are that I've built, that have been published, that are active. And you can tell here in the status, I've got quite a few here that are still in preview, but I've got also quite a few that are active. And then if you look at some of these URLs, you'll see like help.domain.com versus my standard Salesforce, which is right here. Right, I've got that particular URL with a custom path, so to speak. But if looking at this, you can tell that I can either use the out-of-the-box Salesforce URL that was assigned to my org, or I could actually have a custom URL that I could then apply. Now, like I mentioned before, we have our builder, we have our workspaces. If I wanted to go directly to Salesforce digital experience and modify a page, I would go to my builder, and then under my workspaces, this kind of takes you one step higher. This is where I could see my administration, my guide, my pages, all these other various elements that are not visible when I go straight to the builder. But we'll dive into that a little bit here in a second. As you can tell, I've got pages, I've got templates, and I've got themes. Now, currently, I'm not actually utilizing any of that, but that's where I could have some shared pieces that I could throw in there. And we'll actually create our own digital experience here as a test, and we'll see what the template is that I can pick that are from out of the box that come out of Salesforce. But more importantly is my settings. Now, this particular area is different than my administration for each unique digital experience, because this allows me to configure for all my sites. So when I go through here, now I'm actually making changes that cover all of my sites, all of my digital experiences versus just one specific one. So I can, you can kind of look at the header information to kind of get an idea of what it does. But one thing that I had to work with most recently was kind of my roles and user settings, and where I had to let customers access notes and attachments. So notice I can just enable that and then it be across the board. So that saves a lot of time and effort there. The other piece I wanted to show you here, remember I had mentioned where my contact, who is been assigned a digital experience community license, wanted to not just see their own cases, but also cases that are associated with their account. Well, out of the box, Salesforce does not really allow for that, but we actually created a sharing set that I've got right here that I've actually applied to various profiles. And if you can tell here, access determined by, what this allows for is my contacts is associated with an account. I can see all the relatable cases there. So again, sometimes what you'll find within Salesforce is there's certain bits and pieces that may not work 100%, but at the same time, there's a lot of customized settings that you can implement to make it work according to what your requirements are. Now, sometimes that will require a little bit of consulting assistance, but again, that's where Improving could assist everyone or a potential new client with that type of work. So, but let's keep moving. All right, so we've got our sharing sets. Again, I've got my profiles, but notice I've got several profiles listed here. I've labeled them accordingly. I've got Uniware, I've got eGov, I've got nCourt. And if we now go back to our security and I go into my particular profiles, you'll see that if I sort by my user license, actually I can't do that, but you'll see here I've got my customer community and I've got customer community plus. What I mentioned to you before, that plus gives you a little bit more functionality, but now if we click on our community, now this is what drives security for an authenticated user that allows me to then hide certain fields, unhide certain fields, and also kind of drive that behavior on my detail panel for my case. And when I'm talking about that, notice here, right? I've got a lot of information that, you know what, the customer may never, ever need this. So again, this is kind of the stuff that you want to make visible or maybe not visible to your client, and that could be based upon a profile. Maybe you have a profile that's for your tier one, your platinum customers, and that would be a little bit different. So maybe they should have visibility to a few additional fields that the other ones don't. So if we go back to our profile, and I'm looking at my eGov community profile, if I now go to my field level security, and I'll say, let's look at the account view. So within the account view, now I can take individual fields and make them visible or not visible. I love to start with as little as possible. If I have a customer that's going to access this type of information, I really don't want them to see anything but maybe the name, right? They don't have a need to see any financial information at this point because they're probably going to be more on the support side anyways. These are not your CEO, so to speak, your executives that could be looking at this information. So you really want to take that perspective. And honestly, that this is kind of where we always start. We start with less is better and more secure is always going to be better. Start with security. And that's kind of what this visually displays. And that's why a lot of these fields are not visible. So that kind of is how you drive that. Now, having said that, this is about a licensed account. What about the unauthenticated community profile that's more of a guest or anonymous access, right? So let's take a step back. We looked at the security, we looked at the profiles, and we looked at where we go to actually access that. And let me go in here. So the first thing I wanted you to do, actually, before we even do that, let me go ahead and create a site, and I'll quickly walk through this just so I give you that perspective of what templates are visible. I won't actually click next, but I just want to show you out of the box what Salesforce has to offer for your specific requirements, your needs. And so there's a lot of different functionality, different types of templates to choose from. And of course, now it's not showing, of course, the live demo, but that's all right. We'll keep moving. So like I stated earlier, we've got our digital experience. I've gone ahead and clicked new. This will allow me to pick my particular template. But now let's go into my workspaces, and I've gone ahead and I've just picked one specific one. So again, like I mentioned, you've got your builder, your moderation, your content management, your dashboards, your administration, and guided setup. Let's first take a peek at administration. So this is administration that allows me to configure and set up my settings to my specific unique digital experience. So as you can tell here, this is where I can activate. This is where I can go ahead and publish my site, and you can tell by my status is active. So let's say you create a site and you need to quickly take it offline. You can go ahead, and as soon as you deactivate it, they are no longer able to access it. But you notice here, I've got my customer service. If I click on change template, this will allow me to use a different template. And I think there's like about 6 or 7 templates out of the box to choose from. You could probably download a few others that would then belong in that other area that we looked at earlier. But this is where I can still create a site and then change my template on the fly if needed. I've got some preferences here. This allows me to kind of take that branded specific view. I can tell to kind of configure what my upload sizes are, et cetera, et cetera. And then here I've also got my members. Now this is how I provide access. So notice I've got my community login and I've got my support and I've got my community license here too. So I've got two types here. My first one is my system administrator. That would be us, of course. Then I've got a different system administrator that had maybe a little bit less access, but more importantly, I wanted to display the difference between community and community login. So the community, that specific first one is my $5 login, or rather license, and then my community login, that's my $2. So again, those are maybe the users that don't use it as heavily, but still need a license. And then of course I've got my standard support team that has access to this all as well. Now I've got profiles. I could even create a permission set where I could have, let's say I belong to one profile, but that doesn't necessarily match here. I needed numerous other digital experience sites. That's where I kind of would have a permission set that gives me access to more than one. So that makes it a little bit simpler. You've got your contributors. These are your editors that you would assign something for a page. You got your tabs. This is what's visible, what's not. Then you've got your branding. This is how I go ahead and change my colors. I've got some out of the box. You can actually update your header and your footer. The login and registration, this is kind of a neat area. So this is where you can upload your logo. Just be aware of the limitations. You see that 125px max. This is also where you can set up your login page. You can configure how this can be accessed internally. So you've got your single sign-on settings, but in this case, I just have my Salesforce URL, and I don't have SharePoint or any of the other elements. I can even have a self-registration. One caveat with self-registration, out of the box, there is no current approval model in place. So if you were to enable your self-registration, just be aware that they will automatically get assigned a license. So just be careful there. I typically do not enable it, and I may even set up a an own custom web part or custom object with a custom widget that would then allow them to register, but it would then be a approval process. I've got my emails. This is kind of where, as I create my site, I want folks to be able to have a new welcome email. I've got a forgot password change, and you can see there's a lot of different options here. As well, I can even have my default user account. Right now it's set to my account, but typically you would have something, or your kind of like a generic support address, or maybe your heavy support user. That's the user account that sits here. So when this email gets sent out, the from would change to this particular area. That's what the sender is. Now pages, this is where I wanted you to drive initially. This is where I would then go ahead and configure my public profile. So if I go to my to force.com, it's a little bit confusing because it does take you back to the classic experience, but you can see here I've got my custom URLs, but what I really wanted to point out is the public access settings. So if I click on this will take me to my community profile specific to my URL, my site. And this is, again, an unauthenticated or a non-licensed profile. So if I have a guest account, this is how they would hit it, and they would access it in this manner. So that's something that's a really nice feature. But let's keep moving. I know we've got about 12 minutes to go here. So let's get back to my my workspaces, but I specifically want to head on to the builder. So as you can tell here, I click on administration, I click on builder. Now I'm actually in the guts of my site. This is my unique building experience where I can build my widgets. This is where I can add my existing widgets. This is where I can configure them. And I can also configure it based on a licensed or a non-licensed experience. So you can tell here, I've got my username, I've got my search, and I can ask questions. I've got a contact support. And all of these are widgets, or what they refer to as your components. And if I click on this, you can see all the various components I can choose from. Keep in mind, though, these are all typically shared pieces. So unless you have a custom widget that I've got back here, or a custom component, which would be like a custom Apex written Lightning part or component, so to speak, you're going to typically use a something like a record detail, and then that record detail that I throw on my page, I then point at my object. I then point at my specific view that I need. So let me go ahead and click preview here just to kind of give you that experience. So now I'm a logged in account. I click on contact support. So this is my home page. Now this allows me to then log a case. I can search on my contact. I can search on my account name. Now this particular unique use case wanted the individual to be able to select their contact, to select their account. The reason why that was needed is because at times you had a contact that belonged to more than one account. So if I were to leave that blank and I would just use the credentials that come with the login, I would always have the same account. This gives that particular person the flexibility to alter that if needed. What I wanted to point out here, remember the wiki articles and the filtering and that tier level support. So if I go here in my subject, and now again, this is a little bit of a demo environment, of course, I'm still in kind of that preview, but I can test some of the functionality. So I'll go ahead and type in test. And as you can tell, as I'm typing it, the AI takes into play. And on the need answers fast, it actually loads the articles that have test in it. So if I click on one of these here, and I'll click on that, it's actually going to open my article. And now you can tell I've got a graphic in here. I've got a title. I can have a guide and a question and answer. Now, I, of course, have a lot more flexibility, a lot more visibility, really, because I'm an admin logged into the portal in preview mode. But think of your contact, your client connecting and seeing this. They probably would only see something like your guide and maybe a question and answer area. But that's all based on your requirements, what you want visible. And again, the neat part here is this does not have to be authenticated. This could still be based off of a guest account, right? And there you go. So now I'll go ahead and click access. I'll click on back to builder. And now let's take a deeper dive into these individual pieces. So if we click on our contact support form, which is actually an out of the box functionality, as you click on it, on the right-hand side, you definitely have your configuration settings for your specific widget. And if we click on this, this will actually show you what we have for authenticated users and then guest users. So you have a global action that would then actually create a case based off of an authenticated user. So since I'm an authenticated user, granted I'm admin in preview mode, I would have this particular set of actions that would take effect. However, if I'm anonymous, I would get this view where I would then just see a limited version of this particular area. And here I've even got a little bit of an area where I can say, hey, if you're not logged in and you need an associated attachment, because that's one thing that I could not have working without going too customized, go ahead and just email the support address and then attach your attachment to the actual email. So again, that's some of the functionality that's there. But all right, so let's go back to here. Again, we've got our components, our theme. Why I wanted to show this is under if you click on here, you can actually edit some CSS as well. So if you have certain bits and pieces that maybe you don't want to be visible, yet there's not really an ability to hide that, that's a cool little cheat. Again, inspect the page, figure out what your CSS is, and you could actually throw it on there. You've got, of course, your colors like we looked at before. You've got your font and you've got your theme settings. And this also lets you configure your search, your user profile, and your navigation, as well as you've got your page structure. So this shows you your entire layout. So typically I've only gone to the login page, your starting page, and then maybe your article page, or even your ticket or support area. But there's numerous other pages that you could work on. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. Again, just provide you a little bit of a taste there. Then, of course, you've got your settings, and this is what we looked at earlier. Remember when we looked at a little bit different, but these are your settings that, again, let you drive in a little bit deeper. I can change my title. again, another ability to change your settings for your specific sites. But what I wanted to show here is you've got your default navigation. So that's the kind of that top navigation that we looked at earlier. You've got your SEO, which is of course neat. Then you've got your advanced, where you can do some Google Analytics. So there's really a lot of stuff here, but we're limited on time here. So I really wanted to give you the perspective of a authenticated user and an unauthenticated user. So let me go ahead and drive back to my Salesforce environment. Now I'm on my test account. And you'll see here on the right-hand side, this is one really neat feature. Granted, you do need ability, you need access to see this. So out of the box, this is something that needs to be enabled. But if I click on login to experience as a user, this will actually let me log in as that user, or emulate that user, and get that experience that an authenticated user would get. Now, mind you, we're looking at a different brand before. This is another mini company. And you could tell here, I've got unique graphic, and this is what I was telling you about earlier. Notice I've got my test cases, and I've got my status, and I've got who it belongs to, but it's not just my account. So this is my test account, but I also see these particular folks here, like Mark Hamilton, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not as if I only see my cases. I see all the cases that belong to my company, or rather the company that I work for, and that I can then display. And of course I can change the filter here. I can do a search. The neat part here though, again, I can contact support. This is where I would put in, now notice my fields again are different compared to the other one that we just displayed. And this is where I would go ahead and log a ticket. And then of course you could have here where you see need answers fast. You could have the same thing. I don't believe this is currently activated, but if we had a Wiki article, that could display here as well. All right, so that's the authenticated look. So now let's take a peek at an unauthenticated look. So now I've taken an account, or rather that same URL that we looked at before, which was that help.domain.com. And I've logged in with no account. So notice I've got the login screen here. So if I click on that, I could log in, of course. I'm not going to. But in this case, I can go ahead and then still log a case. Notice instead of it saying account and contact, it just has web email, which of course is required. So as I type in my web email address, I can put my subject. I can say, what is this concerning, and select my options. Be aware though, that as you type this in, there is limited functionality. You can somehow, probably there's some custom widgets that you could tackle, but for the most part, the out of the box, you do have some limitations. And then here, like I said earlier, because I'm unauthenticated, I could go in here and then log something as well. Now, if we go back to, there's one other example I wanted to show you here. Let me see if I can grab it. So this is another site. Again, this is a unique experience. If I click on contact support here, again, a little bit of a different view. In this case, I've got all of these required. I've got some address information, but all applicable to this particular mini company that sits under my Salesforce. So it gives the illusion as if every site is different and unique, but it's all streamlined into one. And that's really the beauty of this. And that's where, that's the strength of having this type of platform where I can share content, but also make it a unique experience. So we're right at the time. So I'm going to go back to my slide here. And I wanted to see if anyone had any additional questions. But yeah, again, thank you for taking the time to join us, to kind of give you a taste of what the digital experience is all about. Again, I could probably talk for another 6 hours. We just gave you a very kind of small glimpse. There's so many moving bits and pieces of Salesforce. But again, just try to give that experience where you take a Salesforce environment. Now we're using it for support. I've got numerous requests where I have a requirement that's unique where I don't want them to necessarily all go into one specific site, so I can have numerous sites and then make them as unique as needed and really base that off of your requirements. But that flexibility is just massive. So again, thank you for your time. We're right at about 2 p.m. or 1 p.m. Central. And if you have any questions and answers, please feel free. I'll check to see, do we have any questions? Let me see here. Let me take a peek.
Not at this point.
All right, so I think we're at a good spot. Again, thank you for your time, and I think we can call it a day. So thank you again, and take care. And if you can, please take your time to maybe even go to Salesforce and demo this for yourself. And again, if you have some needs and requirements, we here at Improving would be more than happy to assist with all of that. Thanks again. Cheers, everyone, and thank you.